changed in government, so it wasn't quite as priority for the incoming government. Sadly, what we have seen is the same time Nigeria started the broadband policy and plan, and with the same time, exactly the same time that Kenya started its broadband policy and plan. Between then and now, Kenya has built over 10,000 kilometers across Kenya, across about 57 suburbs in Kenya, 10,000 kilometers. Nigeria hasn't built a kilometer. So those are some of the issues we have.
Right, thank you, David. I hear a lot of government participation. I'll come back to that, working and general infrastructure in Nigeria. Power seems to be, at the center of it all. People, a lot of Nigerians consider access to power as probably the biggest problem we have. So the question I have is, alternative energy, can it really be the solution, that co-working operators seek in terms of providing power, for the entrepreneurs in their space?
Thank you very much. I think I'll start at the beginning of our journey. We were part of the hub. So when we started the company, we started Vineyard. We were actually sharing offices opposite paper capture. So we were able to see the whole growth and experience the essence of working in a hub. That also made us look at it from the point of view of what our own core business was, which is energy. When we were looking for officers initially, the numbers that were coming in were quite heavy. You needed to buy generators at 2 point something, you needed to go and hire the proxy XYZ. And one of our old friends, who's late at the moment, the former chef of the rental, had driven past Vina Hub in Lekki and got so excited. I said, "Oh, you must come and see that." And it took us literally, when this is Scotland, it took us maybe a minute to make the decision that here is what we want. The sales part of it was really non-existent to us. It was affordable. It gave the essence of interaction with new entrepreneurs. So we could always go out and ask different people different ideas. So we lived through what Kola actually was describing earlier. Now, because we were into renewable energy, one of the things that a lot of people take for granted is the sense that if the power was to go now, the quality of this whole conference would become a totally different issue. If we lost power now. But then our experience in the country also showed us that I think Nigeria is probably one of those places where it's probably one of the most expensive power consumers that I know of around the world. So the essence will therefore be, how can we make it easier? Renewable energy, as far as hubs are concerned, would have to come in from the perception of lowering their cost. The lower their costs are, the running costs are it. Apart from that, the lower the running costs are, the more they're able to offer, because the bottom line will become larger. So if you look at things like power, and you go into solar, or hybrid systems of generating energy, it takes them away from what Vineyard used to do, which was the craziest thing, which they had to do, was to run 24 hours off grid for a very long time. I mean, what business in the world could survive that? And you really see that across the nation. So when it comes to competitiveness, it makes us less competitive. So we start to concentrate on infrastructure, and we look at energy. The energy sector would have to offer cheaper energy for businesses to become more thriving. And that's one of the ethos that we're kind of looking at. I've been privileged or fortunate to have worked on a couple of projects in Nigeria, for example. There was what they call the model schools in Nigeria, which at the moment, there are 170, I think, in Lagos, that run off grid of pure solar. And it's just to provide them with the essentials, light, the laboratories to work, for them to be on. And when we finished the project, we were one of the few companies that did the project in Lagos for the schools. And when I finished the project, we went back and asked, we interviewed one of the principals, the effect of what having 24-hour power was meant to them. And what she said was very, very moving for me, because what she said was, once the program was commissioned and they had 24-hour power, that the teachers would not go home early because they were able to have power at source, and the students would also not go home early. So what the school decided to do was, since you're all around, why don't you just put that together? And they started to see the grades improve. Did something similar in the north for hospitals as well, which makes such a difference. So the point I'm making is that if all the hubs and the co-working spaces were to be as competitive, for example, as what they have in Berlin, in New York, in London, and all those places, I can imagine, like what Connor said was, I think his figures were, there are 170 of them now, if not more. So I can imagine what you'll be able to offer. There was somebody who said something to me in the past, and I also, it was a concept of two people with the same idea, one of them getting up to do it, one of them just thinking about it. So you can understand that Nigerians are very entrepreneurial people. We have all the ideas, we've got all the young businesses, we've got all of the entrepreneurship going on. So I think the hubs have a place to do, but then companies like us, renewable energy, would have a lot of support to give as well.
Okay. Coinciding, so I know you have kind of two sides to what you do. There's building projects for houses, and then there's design you do for hubs, and you've done some work for us. But the question I want to ask you is, so around America and Europe, the concept of smart offices, smart buildings, begin to emerge, and you see it spread. First question, do you see us in Nigeria as ready for that? And two, if we have, how do we go about deploying smart solutions in terms of building co-working spaces?
I guess to answer that question, I'll probably have to say a few things first, especially about the Nigerian environment and what I understand about it. Mr. Tayo touched very briefly about the fact that we're generally all entrepreneurial. And so I can promise you that there's no idea that's happening in the world that will not come here. So because that will happen, I think that it's almost impossible to imagine that smart houses and smart offices will not eventually become a thing that we look forward to and try to achieve. Now, as a service provider, and because I know that design is one of the greatest drivers of any environment, so we look at the co-creation, co-working environment, places like Kenya, for example, and we know that one of the things that are most important to them is providing an enabling environment for people to work. Now, if technology is part of that enabling environment, then it's impossible to imagine that because people have come together to work in a singular space with a singular idea to drive innovation, to prove things forward, that innovation will not be part of that environment. So what do I do as a designer? To try and incorporate, I guess, both an enabling space with design, as well as technology for as much as we can, or as much as it's being able to be afforded by the people who work in that space. And so, for me, in general, technology is definitely the way that we're going in terms of smart houses, smart homes, and smart buildings.
It's interesting that you mentioned that, and I'm tying that again with what Tayo said about making co-working spaces competitive, because smart buildings actually help to drop costs. So we have solutions where you can pretty much light up offices based on movement, thermal movement, access, broadband increase, and ACs and what have you. So again, it seems like power and of course broadband would definitely affect what you can offer as a service provider. What would you say about it?
Definitely. Architecture as I guess an industry in general, and the real estate industry is definitely moving in the direction to try and assimilate as much tech as we can into the design. I would say that the real estate industry is a little behind in terms of tech evolution from everybody else. However, what you're speaking about in terms of being able to control power consumption and energy consumption within a space is probably one of the smartest things that has happened in the generation of I guess, new architects and everybody that's coming into work in this environment. So being able to move from a space and being able to control your power consumption just by your presence is definitely something that I guess any business should consider as a cost-saving opportunity or mechanism.
Okay. Chinaza, I know you said you're probably the least experienced when it comes here, but I'll give you an example. So Blackstone bought the office group. Blackstone is like one of the biggest real estate companies in the world, private equity firm also. And basically their plan is to expand, they're leaving the operations to the office group, but they're funding. So first question is that something that ACA is looking to do? And the second question is, what do you think, is there an opportunity for collaboration between real estate as it is and the co-working space, particularly as regards infrastructure development?
Nigerian businesses struggle with, which is scale. So if you tell me there are 170 co-working spaces, my answer would be how many companies run those co-working spaces? And more often than not, it will be 170. So everybody and their brother wants to set up their co-working space. And I think one of the things that is missing for us is scale on a company level. So in co-working, you talk about how you get one internet connection, you share the broadband. You get one power solution, you share it among the companies. The co-working spaces themselves need to see this as a return to scale, because you will always struggle to be a company that deals with the difficulties of Nigeria if you try and grow organically. You can think your life is going great, you got that cheap dollar loan from your Silicon Valley Connect, and overnight the dollar goes from 150 to 360. That's a very hard conversation you're having with somebody. So if you have 30 co-working spaces, you're more in a better position to solve for that. And so the thing that I would urge the co-working industry is to solve for that. They need to get bigger quicker. Because given the way Nigerian business cycles work, a shop is always around the corner. And so for companies to be attractive to people like us, they need to show that they're able to scale and weather the storm. The other thing which people also forget is that management depth in Nigeria is very shallow. So the managers across 170 co-working companies may be thin in each one, but put 30 or 40 of them together and it starts looking formidable. So what I urge the sector to do is to find ways to collaborate and consolidate to create large-scale opportunities. And once you do that, all these things become easier. And it's something that a lot of Nigerian businesses struggle with, but that is broadly the driver of the kind of change that will enable the sector to go to the next level. The second thing is also looking at non-traditional funding as much as possible. People like us bring money in dollars. We can't help it, that's the way our funds are. So you come to us, you're going to be like, yes, here, have a few $1 million, great, and then you pay it back over time. But one of the things that Nigeria has done is that it creates a lot of avenues for funding. So Tosi mentioned her 50 million in co-working loan money. Every co-working firm should find a project and take that money. It's at 5% for 10 years, I think she said. It's effectively free money. Inflation is 13%. If you didn't have a project before she mentioned it, find a project. BOI is offering money at 10%, up to 2 billion. Figure out how you get big enough to take that money. CBN has intervention funds up to 4 billion. Figure out how you get big enough to take that money. That is the opportunity. The opportunity is, how do I, as a co-working space, develop as a scale player that businesses will come to want to work with me? The other thing that I think people mistake a lot is trying to solve for the problem of the markets that they read about. So co-working is not just a tech solution in Nigeria for tech companies. It's for all companies. Talk to any SME. Office spaces for people who